Welcome to our deep dive on self-therapy techniques.
Sounds fascinating.
We're diving into the art of self-therapy today
Okay.
to uncover those practical tools from psychology for understanding yourself better and making positive changes.
Love that.
Think of it as a toolkit for unlocking your inner potential.
I like that a lot.
So the book starts with this simple but powerful premise.
Okay.
Self-awareness is key.
Hmm.
And it suggests asking yourself throughout the day,
Uh-huh.
what do I notice about myself right now?
Yeah, that's a great question.
Just like flexing that mental muscle,
Right.
observing your thoughts, feelings, and actions without judgment.
It's like shining a light on those autopilot patterns we all have.
And what's fascinating is that simply noticing can be that gateway to deeper insights.
Absolutely.
The book outlines a 6-step process by Dr. Tom Stevens,
Okay.
a psychologist specializing in self-therapy.
Got it.
And I think it beautifully illustrates this idea.
Tell me more about this 6-step process.
Okay, so it starts with observation, right?
Right.
You simply notice what's happening internally
Okay.
without trying to change anything.
Yeah.
It's about becoming an observer of your own mind.
Right.
Then you zoom in on any recurring patterns or problems you're noticing.
So if I notice I always get anxious before meetings,
Yes,
that's a sign to dig deeper.
precisely.
Okay.
And then the third step is to really tune into those strong emotions.
Okay.
What feelings keep bubbling up?
Yeah.
What are you trying to avoid feeling?
Right.
The book emphasizes getting curious about those uncomfortable emotions
Yeah.
because they often hold the key to that deeper understanding.
It reminds me of the idea of shadow work,
Oh, yeah,
confronting those parts of ourselves we tend to hide.
exactly.
The book talks about how disowning negative traits can lead to projecting them onto others. You
Yeah.
know, like when you get disproportionately upset with someone
Yes,
for a flaw you secretly worry about in yourself,
that's a great connection.
that could definitely be your shadow talking.
Integrating your shadow means acknowledging both the good and the bad within.
That's right.
And the book suggests some techniques for this,
Okay.
like rephrasing judgments of others to apply to yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of saying, I hate lazy people,
Yeah.
you might say, I can be lazy sometimes.
It's about accepting imperfection
Yes,
and practicing self-compassion,
Yeah.
right?
absolutely. The book emphasizes that it's not about beating yourself up for your flaws,
Right.
but understanding and working with them.
Now, the book also introduces Gestalt therapy,
Okay.
which focuses on being present and taking responsibility for your life.
Right.
It suggests exercises like visualizing unfinished business from the past and addressing it even if it's only in your imagination.
This resonates with the idea of resolving pending issues,
Yeah.
those lingering conflicts or regrets
Right.
that can prevent us from fully engaging with the present.
It's about mentally closing the circle even years later.
Yes.
And the book highlights how powerful that can be.
One technique from Gestalt therapy is the empty chair technique.
Oh, I've heard of that.
You imagine the person or situation that's bothering you is sitting in a chair across from you,
Right.
and you have a conversation with them.
Yeah.
It could be a powerful way to process those unresolved feelings.
It also emphasizes reframing questions as statements. Instead of asking, why am I so unhappy?
Right.
You'd state, I am unhappy,
Yeah.
and then explore what you can do about it right now.
Yeah, I like that.
It shifts the focus from dwelling on the problem to taking action.
That shift in perspective.
Now let's talk about this idea of an inner child.
Okay.
The book suggests it holds the key to understanding our adult patterns. It emphasizes reparenting ourselves
Right.
by meeting those needs that went unmet in childhood.
Right.
Imagine writing a letter to your younger self,
Yeah.
offering the comfort or validation you craved back then.
This concept is so profound.
It's about recognizing how our early experiences shape us, and then offering ourselves the love and care we may have missed out on.
Exactly. The book gives prompts for connecting with your inner child,
Okay.
like visualizing yourself as a child
Yeah.
and asking what they need.
Uh-huh.
It even suggests giving your inner child a gift or taking them on a play date, doing something just for fun,
Right.
like when you were young.
What's key here is nurturing that playful, innocent part of ourselves.
Yeah.
It's not about dwelling on the past,
Right.
but healing it and moving forward with a greater sense of wholeness.
The book also explores narrative therapy,
Okay.
which encourages you to view your life as a story you can edit and revise. Imagine creating chapters for your life,
Right.
highlighting not just the struggles, but also those moments of growth and resilience.
This raises an important question.
Right.
How can we rewrite the stories we tell ourselves about who we are?
Exactly.
We often get stuck in negative narratives,
Right.
but this technique reminds us that we have the power to change those stories.
So instead of seeing myself as the failure,
Yeah.
I could reframe my story to focus on my perseverance, on
Right.
the lessons I've learned.
Exactly. You become the author of your own life.
Right.
Choosing how you want the story to unfold.
Now, this brings us to the powerful world of cognitive behavioral therapy,
Okay.
or CBT.
Right.
The book emphasizes that our thoughts shape our reality,
Yeah.
and changing those thoughts can change our lives.
Well, that's a fundamental principle of CBT.
Yes. It's about recognizing that connection between our thoughts, feelings, and behaviors.
Right.
And learning to challenge those automatic negative thoughts
Yeah.
can hold us back.
One tool the book presents is the ABCD model.
Okay.
Activating Event Belief Consequence Dispute.
Okay.
It's a framework for analyzing how our thoughts trigger feelings and actions.
Let's break that down.
Okay.
Say the activating event is getting rejected for a job.
Uh-huh.
The belief might be, I'm a failure.
Okay.
The consequence could be despair and giving up.
Okay. But with the dispute stage, you challenge that belief with evidence, right?
Yes.
Like past successes, skills, and so on.
Precisely.
Mm.
You create a more rational and empowering perspective.
Right.
Instead of, I'm a failure,
Yeah.
you might say, this one rejection doesn't define me.
Uh-huh.
I have valuable skills and experience, and I'll keep applying until I find the right fit.
It's about shifting from feeling like a victim
Yeah.
to becoming an empowered agent.
I love that.
The book also dives into cognitive distortions,
Okay.
those sneaky thought patterns that warp our perception,
Mhm.
like all or nothing thinking,
Right.
catastrophizing,
Right.
and discounting the positive.
Yeah.
It offers tools for recognizing and correcting them.
One powerful technique is the triple column exercise.
Okay.
You list your automatic negative thoughts,
Right.
identify the distortion at play, and then write a more rational response.
It's like having a mental debate with yourself.
Right.
Countering negativity with a more balanced perspective.
Yeah.
Exactly.
It's about training your mind to think more realistically and constructively.
But what if it all feels too overwhelming? The book introduces cognitive diffusion techniques
Okay.
from acceptance and commitment therapy, or ACT.
Right.
The idea isn't to suppress thoughts,
Okay.
but to change our relationship with them.
Okay.
Imagine your thoughts as leaves floating down a stream.
I like that.
You observe them without getting swept away.
It's about creating distance
Right.
and recognizing that you are not your thoughts.
I'm not trying to control them,
Yep.
just observing them as they pass.
Yes, you become an observer of your own mind
Right.
rather than being controlled by it.
That analogy makes it feel less intimidating.
So far, we've covered self-awareness, shadow work, gestalt therapy, inner child work, narrative therapy, CBT, and ACT.
Wow.
It's empowering to realize we have so many tools at our disposal.
It can feel overwhelming at first.
Right.
But remember, you don't have to use every technique.
Right.
Experiment and see what resonates with you on your unique journey.
That's a great point. It's not a one-size-fits-all approach.
Exactly.
Self-therapy is an ongoing process of developing self-awareness, challenging limiting beliefs, and taking action to create the life you want.
It takes time, patience, and self-compassion.
Before we move on, let's recap the key takeaways from this part of our deep dive.
Okay.
We started by exploring self-awareness as the foundation of self-therapy,
Right.
highlighting Dr. Tom Stevens' 6-step process.
Uh-huh.
We then delved into the concept of shadow work,
Right.
recognizing and integrating those hidden aspects of ourselves.
And we touched on Gestalt therapy,
Yes.
emphasizing being present and taking responsibility for our lives,
Right.
including techniques like the empty chair and reframing questions as statements.
Yes, we explored the powerful idea of the inner child,
Right.
highlighting the need to reparent ourselves and meet those unmet needs from childhood.
We also touched on narrative therapy,
Wow.
viewing our lives as stories we can revise and rewrite,
Right.
becoming the authors of our own journeys.
Finally, we discussed cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, emphasizing how our thoughts shape our reality,
Right.
with tools like the ABCD model and the triple column technique
Right.
to challenge and reframe negative thinking patterns.
And we wrapped up with the concept of cognitive diffusion from ACT,
Yes.
learning to observe our thoughts without being swept away by them.
That was a great summary. It's a lot to take in, but I hope you're starting to see the potential of self-therapy.
Yeah.
to
Definitely.
make positive changes in your life.
I know I am, and you know what? This is just the beginning.
Oh, there's so much more to explore.
We haven't even touched on things like systematic desensitization,
Right.
behavioral activation, or
Yeah.
behavioral experiments.
Stay tuned because in the next part of this deep dive, we'll delve into those practical tools and techniques
Great.
for putting these insights into action and creating lasting change.
You won't want to miss it.
I'm excited for that. Welcome back to your deep dive on self-therapy techniques.
Glad to be back.
We're continuing our exploration of the art of self-therapy.
Right.
And I'm eager to delve deeper.
Okay.
In the last part,
Uh-huh.
we explored understanding our thoughts and beliefs.
Right.
But what about those deeper patterns
Hmm.
rooted in our past experiences?
Yeah, that's a great question.
How can we address those?
That's where this next section of the book comes in.
Okay.
It delves into how our early relationships, especially with caregivers, shape us,
Right.
and how those early bonds can influence our relationships throughout life.
You mean things like attachment styles?
Exactly.
I've heard about that,
Uh-huh.
but never fully understood it.
The book explains how our early bonds with caregivers shape our understanding of connection
Okay.
and how those patterns play out in our adult interactions.
So if someone had a caregiver who was inconsistent
Right.
or emotionally unavailable,
Yeah,
it could create challenges with trust and intimacy later on.
that's right.
Yeah.
The book outlines the different attachment styles: secure, ambivalent, avoidant, and disorganized.
Right.
Each style has its own set of characteristics and tendencies in relationships.
Okay, so here's where it gets really interesting.
Yeah.
How do we use this knowledge to actually improve our relationships?
Mm,
If I realize I have an avoidant attachment style, for example,
right.
what can I do about it?
The book offers some practical guidance.
Okay.
One suggestion is to become more aware of your emotional reactions in relationships.
Okay.
Pay attention to how you're feeling and why,
Right.
especially in moments of conflict or stress.
So instead of just reacting automatically,
What?
I take a moment to pause and observe my emotions.
Exactly.
Like, okay, I'm feeling defensive right now.
Yeah.
Why is that?
It's about bringing awareness to those automatic responses.
Right.
The book also suggests finding a role model with a secure attachment style.
Someone who seems to navigate relationships with ease and healthy boundaries.
Exactly.
I can see how observing their behavior could be really helpful.
You can learn so much by watching how they communicate, handle conflict,
Right.
and maintain a sense of independence while still being connected to their partner.
That makes a lot of sense.
The book also encourages challenging yourself to step outside your comfort zone in relationships.
Okay.
If you tend to withdraw or avoid intimacy, for instance,
Right.
try pushing yourself to be more open and vulnerable.
Or if you're always the one clinging and seeking reassurance,
Yeah.
maybe challenge yourself to give your partner more space.
Exactly. It's about consciously choosing new ways of relating,
Right.
even if it feels uncomfortable at first.
Yeah.
These small shifts can lead to big changes over time.
Now I want to touch on something many people can relate to,
Okay.
the inner child.
Yes. This concept is central to understanding how our past experiences continue to impact us.
The book talks about reparenting our inner child
Right.
by meeting those needs that went unmet in childhood.
Uh-huh.
It sounds a little abstract.
Yeah.
Can you give me a concrete example of how this might work?
Absolutely. Let's say someone grew up in a household where expressing emotions was discouraged. They learned to suppress their feelings and became disconnected from their own needs.
Okay.
As adults, they might struggle with assertiveness or setting boundaries.
Because they never learned how to express their needs
Right.
or stand up for themselves.
Exactly. In this case, reparenting the inner child might involve learning to identify and validate those emotions.
Okay.
It could involve practicing saying no
Right.
or setting healthy boundaries in relationships.
So it's about giving yourself the love, support, and validation that you may have missed out on as a child.
Precisely. It's a powerful way to heal those old wounds and create a more fulfilling present.
The book has some interesting exercises for connecting with the inner child,
Yeah.
like visualizing yourself as a child and asking what they need.
Uh-huh.
It also suggests writing a letter to your younger self
Right.
or giving them a gift,
Right.
something that would have brought them joy.
What's fascinating about these techniques is that they tap into a deeper emotional level. It's not just about intellectual understanding, but about actually experiencing that healing and connection.
Now, I'm really intrigued by this idea of rewriting our life stories.
Okay.
It sounds like something out of a movie.
Yeah,
Can you elaborate on that?
absolutely. The book dives into narrative therapy,
Okay.
which views our lives as stories we construct. These stories are shaped by our experiences, beliefs, and interpretations,
Right.
and they can either empower us or hold us back.
So if I've always seen myself as the shy one,
Mm-hmm.
that story could be limiting my potential.
Exactly. It could prevent you from pursuing opportunities or forming new connections
Yeah.
because you're stuck in that old narrative.
But with narrative therapy, we can revise those stories, right?
Right.
We can choose to focus on our strengths and moments of resilience rather than just the struggles.
Precisely. It's about becoming aware of those limiting narratives and consciously choosing to rewrite them.
I love that idea.
Yeah.
It's like taking back control of your own narrative and creating a more empowering story for yourself.
It's about recognizing that you have the power to shape your own perception
Right.
and choose how you want your story to unfold.
Okay, so we've explored some techniques for addressing those deeper patterns
Right.
rooted in our past experiences.
Mm-hmm.
What about practical tools for putting all these insights into action?
That's where the final part of the art of self-therapy really shines.
What?
It's packed with techniques for making tangible changes in your life.
I can't wait to hear about them.
Ah,
Tell me about systematic desensitization.
okay.
It sounds a bit intimidating.
It's actually a very effective technique for overcoming fears and phobias.
How does it work?
It involves gradually exposing yourself to the thing you're afraid of
Okay.
while using relaxation techniques to manage your anxiety.
Mm.
You start with small steps.
Right.
And over time, you desensitize yourself to the fear.
So if I'm afraid of spiders, I wouldn't start by holding a tarantula.
Right.
I'd maybe look at pictures of spiders first
Exactly.
and move on to being in the same room as a spider.
Right.
And so on.
The book gives detailed instructions on how to create a hierarchy of fears
Okay.
and work your way up the ladder. Always pairing the exposure with relaxation techniques like deep breathing or visualization.
It's like retraining your brain to associate the feared object with calmness rather than panic.
Precisely. It's a powerful way to overcome those irrational fears that can hold you back.
Now let's talk about behavioral activation.
Okay.
That sounds a bit different.
Yeah.
What's that all about?
Behavioral activation is a powerful tool,
Right.
especially for managing depression and low motivation.
Okay, so if I'm feeling stuck and unmotivated, what can I do? Just force myself to be more active.
It's not about forcing yourself.
Okay.
It's about strategically engaging in activities that bring you a sense of pleasure, mastery, or connection with others.
So instead of spending all day on the couch watching TV,
Yeah.
I might schedule a walk with a friend, cook a healthy meal,
Right.
or take up a new hobby.
Exactly.
Things that make me feel good and give me a sense of accomplishment.
The book emphasizes that action often precedes motivation. By engaging in positive activities, you can actually shift your mood
Okay.
and create a positive feedback loop.
I love that idea.
Yeah.
It's like priming the pump for motivation.
Right.
You start with a small action,
Uh-huh.
and it creates momentum for more positive actions.
Precisely. It's about breaking out of those negative patterns and creating a more fulfilling and engaged life.
Now, this next technique sounds really interesting.
Okay.
Tell me about behavioral experiments.
Behavioral experiments are a fascinating way to challenge those deeply ingrained beliefs and assumptions that we often hold on to without even realizing it.
So if I believe that everyone hates me,
Uh-huh.
a behavioral experiment would help me test that belief in the real world.
Exactly. It's about designing an experiment to gather evidence
Okay.
that either supports or refutes your belief.
So I might try striking up conversations with people,
Yeah.
paying attention to their reactions,
Right.
and seeing if my belief holds up.
Or you might try asking for help or feedback from others, observing whether they respond with kindness or rejection.
I can see how that would be a really eye-opening way to challenge those negative assumptions.
Right.
It's like holding your beliefs up to the light of reality.
Exactly. And often the results of these experiments can be surprising.
Right.
We might discover that our fears are unfounded or that we're far more capable and loved than we believe.
This whole approach to self-therapy is so empowering.
It's about taking ownership of your own well-being and using these tools to create positive change.
It's not about passively hoping things will get better,
Right.
but about actively shaping your own experience.
I couldn't agree more. It's about recognizing that you have the power to heal, grow, and create the life you want.
Before we move on, let's recap what we covered in this part of our deep dive.
Okay.
We started by exploring attachment styles,
Right.
understanding how our early bonds with caregivers shape our relationships throughout life,
Mm-hmm.
We explored the different attachment styles
Yeah.
and discussed practical tips for improving our relationships,
Right.
including becoming more aware of our emotional reactions,
Mhm.
finding secure role models,
Right.
and challenging ourselves to step outside our comfort zones.
We then revisited the concept of the inner child,
Yes.
focusing on the importance of re-parenting ourselves to meet those unmet needs from childhood.
Right.
We discussed techniques like visualization, letter writing, and gift giving to connect with and heal our inner child.
Next, we explored narrative therapy,
Right. Right.
recognizing that our lives are stories we construct
Mm-hmm.
and that we have the power to revise those stories,
Right.
focusing on strengths and resilience.
Finally, we discussed practical tools for putting these insights into action, including systematic desensitization for overcoming fears, behavioral activation for managing depression and low motivation,
Mm.
and behavioral experiments for challenging deeply held beliefs.
That was a great summary.
Thanks.
We've covered a lot of ground, but the key takeaway is that you have a wealth of resources at your disposal
Yeah.
to understand yourself better and create lasting change.
I'm feeling inspired. And you know what?
Mm.
There's one more fascinating aspect of the art of self-therapy
Okay.
that we haven't touched on yet.
Right.
We still need to discuss the concept of internal family systems,
Okay.
a way to understand the different parts of ourselves and how they interact.
Stay tuned, because in the next part,
Okay.
we'll unpack this powerful concept
Sounds great.
and see how it can help us create greater harmony within ourselves
Right.
and in our relationships.
You won't want to miss it.
Welcome back to your deep dive on self-therapy techniques.
That's great to be back.
We're in the final stretch of exploring the art of self-therapy.
Hi.
And I'm excited to unpack this last concept.
Yeah.
Last time we left off with a bit of a cliffhanger.
Right.
You mentioned something called internal family systems.
That's right. Internal family systems, or IFS,
Right.
offers a unique way of understanding the different parts of ourselves.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Break this down for me. What do we mean by parts?
Think of it this way. Our minds are not monolithic. We all have different aspects or subpersonalities that influence our thoughts, feelings, and actions.
So it's like having a whole cast of characters inside our heads.
Exactly. And just like in a family, these parts can have different roles, motivations, and even conflicts with each other.
So I might have a part that's super organized and responsible,
Right.
but also a part that's impulsive and wants to have fun.
Precisely, the book explains that these parts often develop as adaptations to our early experiences.
So if I grew up in a chaotic environment, I might have a part that's always anxious and trying to control everything.
That's a great example. Or if you were often criticized as a child, you might have a part that's highly self-critical and fears failure.
This is making a lot of sense now. How does IFS actually help us?
Right.
Knowing about these parts is one thing,
Yeah.
but how do we work with them?
That's where the beauty of IFS lies. It's not about trying to eliminate or suppress these parts,
Okay.
but about understanding and accepting them.
Because they all serve a purpose.
Right.
Even the ones that seem negative.
Exactly. Even the most critical or anxious parts are trying to protect us in some way based on their understanding of the world.
So how do we start working with these parts? It feels a little abstract.
The book outlines a 6-step process that's similar to what we discussed earlier with self-awareness.
Remind me of those steps.
The first step is to simply notice these parts as they arise. Pay attention to your thoughts, feelings, and bodily sensations.
So if I feel a knot in my stomach when I think about a presentation,
Right.
that's a cue to explore that feeling.
Exactly. Next, focus on that part. Don't try to push it away or ignore it. Just be curious about it.
Then what?
The third step is to flesh out that part. Ask yourself, what are the thoughts and beliefs associated with this feeling? What are the sensations? Does it have a particular image or metaphor?
So in my presentation example, I might realize that the knot in my stomach is connected to thoughts like, I'm going to mess up or people will judge me.
Exactly. The fourth step is to consider how you feel toward this part. Do you feel compassion, fear, anger? Just notice those feelings without judgment.
This is starting to feel a bit like those other self-therapy techniques we discussed.
It's all interconnected. Now, here's where it gets really interesting.
Okay.
Step 5 is to befriend that part.
Befriend it. You mean like make friends with my anxiety?
In a sense, yes. It's about acknowledging that this part is a part of you and trying to understand its perspective.
So instead of seeing it as the enemy, I try to see it as a part of me that's trying to help, even if it's doing it in a clumsy way.
Exactly. And finally, step 6 is to explore the fears that this part is trying to protect you from.
So with my presentation anxiety, I might uncover a fear of rejection or failure.
Once you understand the underlying fear, you can start to address it with compassion and understanding.
This is so fascinating. It's like creating a more harmonious relationship with all the different aspects of ourselves.
That's the heart of IFS. It's about creating internal unity and wholeness.
And I imagine that translates into our external relationships as well.
Absolutely. When we're at peace with ourselves, we're better able to connect with others in healthy and authentic ways.
Okay, before we wrap up this deep dive,
Hmm.
any final thoughts you'd like to share about IFS?
I just emphasize that IFS is a powerful but nuanced approach. It can be incredibly helpful to work with a trained IFS therapist
Right.
who can guide you through the process.
That makes sense, especially as you're first getting started.
Right. And remember, the goal is not to become perfect or eliminate all our negative parts. It's about understanding and accepting them and creating a more balanced and harmonious inner world.
Exactly. Wow, what a journey this deep dive has been. We've covered so much ground,
Right.
from self-awareness to shadow work, gestalt therapy, inner child work, narrative therapy, CBT, ACT, and now IFS. It's truly empowering to realize we have so many tools at our disposal to understand ourselves better and create positive change in our lives.
I couldn't agree more.
Remember, self-therapy is a journey, not a destination. It's about ongoing growth, self-discovery, and cultivating a deeper connection with ourselves. And remember, you don't have to do it alone. There are resources, books, therapists, and communities out there to support you on this path. Thanks for joining me on this deep dive into the art of self-therapy. I hope you found it as insightful and inspiring as I have. And to our listeners, keep exploring, keep experimenting, and keep believing in your power to grow. Until next time, happy diving.